Every business works exactly as it was designed. Even if you don't think you have designed anything, even if you think you're winging it, even if you think you're being flexible, your business is working exactly as it has been designed. The problem, and why most people are stressing out, burning out, all of those things, not making as much money as they could. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, is because the business is not actually designed with intention. It is designed with reaction.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. Ever feel like your business is running you instead of the other way around? You're not alone. I have been there. I think Gwen has been there. Just about every entrepreneur we know has been there. And so today, Gwen and I are going to talk about why winging it in your business is costing you way more than you realize. It is costing you more time than you realize, more money, and more energy. And in case you're new to the show, my name is Tonya Kubo, and I am joined by operations expert extraordinaire, Gwen Bortner. And today, we are exploring a truth that might be hard to hear. And if you've been with us for a while, you know that's what we do around here. We talk about hard truths. We have hard conversations. And so your business is running exactly as it was designed to run, even if you're just flying by the seat of your pants around there. So before we jump in, Gwen, I want you to just give us one tip that our listeners can use today to start being more intentional about their business operations.
So the first thing to be more intentional about the operations is to actually pay attention to what you're doing. And that sounds kind of trite, and it probably sounds obvious, but most of us don't actually think about what we're doing. We just do it.
Yeah.
And that's really what I'm saying is think about what you're doing. Pay attention to either all the steps, all the connection points, and even only picking one aspect to say, how many times do I have to talk to somebody else as we make this thing happen? So that would be a connection point. So I'm only going to pay attention to the connection points. Or how many steps does this actually take? And say, I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this. This is three steps. And pay attention to how big are the steps. I used to challenge people to say, how many steps does it take to actually tie your shoes? And and people would start, and I would come up with no, there's actually 15 steps. I can't remember what the number is now. And they were like, what? And it's like, well, you're assuming a whole lot between here and here. And if you're actually teaching someone from the first time that doesn't know anything, you have to start with put on your shoe. And people don't think about that part.
Right.
Pick up the laces. Right. I mean, there's a whole lot more into most things than we think. And so paying attention and saying, what are those steps? What are those processes? What are those connection points? Is the first thing to being able to make improvements, because this is where you can start seeing, are they consistent? Are they random? Are they taking similar amounts of time each time? Are they taking different amounts of time each time? All of these are things that you can start gathering data on once you actually start observing it and not just doing it.
Okay, so that brings up a question that
I'm always curious, did I even go at all where you thought I was going to go?
Right, it's like everybody thinks this is so polished and scripted. Meanwhile, I've got a Post-it note with 3 things chicken scratched on it, and I'm like, maybe we'll go here, maybe we won't, but we'll see what happens.
I'm always like, I wonder if that went at all where she was hoping that was going to go.
Well, so here's what I hear a lot, right? And and we both individually and collectively work with a lot of creative entrepreneurs, right? You have a huge, huge depth of experience in the craft industry, in addition to working in tech. I have experience in tech, but also in like author speaker land. And I've worked a lot with course creators and people who run like large organizations in addition to working with schools. And what I find when I'm taking, remove all the big corporations, but really look at the more solopreneur, the creative entrepreneur, who maybe it's them and plus two. And what I oftentimes hear is I don't want to write down what I'm doing. I don't want to pay attention to the steps I'm doing because I like to stay flexible, right? I like to just, like I just like to go where my gut tells me to go. And so what do you say to that?
So years ago, I was working with a fantastic coach, Mark Levy, and one of the things is he helps you try to pull out like what's all
Mhm.
your thought leadership, right?
Right.
And one of the things that I talked about with him that I don't think we actually maybe ever even said on this
Mhm.
podcast at this point is most creatives are using their intuition at the wrong step in the process. They think by intuiting at
Mhm.
the beginning that they're creating a logical outcome
Mm.
and that that's the way that they should work. But actually, the better result happens is if the beginning pieces are very consistent and logical and
Mhm.
we intuit at the end. And so
Okay.
it's almost always reversed until people really start paying attention. So they're intuiting at the beginning, which means they have to make up everything that follows, and they think that that creates this very logical, explainable outcome. But what really happens is that creates a whole lot of work every time. And where the real value is using that intuition, that gut piece and that flexible piece right at the very end. If you really need that there, if you
Mhm.
need it at all in whatever it is that you're doing. And sometimes you do. I mean, because like you said, we both work with big creative kinds of folks, and they often do need that for it to
Mhm.
still feel like a fun business and, all of the things that go along with that. But doing it at the beginning is actually not the place to be doing it. The place to be doing it is at the end. And most of them have it backwards.
Right. And well, you know what I think is, and I mean, I've seen this with our clients, but I've also seen this with, like service providers I've worked with, which is I feel like there's a confusion between flexibility and lack of structure. Like they think being flexible means that you don't have a structure in place and that a structure in place automatically eliminates any flexibility. Whereas, I've heard you talk about this, but I believe it too. It's like when there's a structure, you know where to be flexible and how flexible you can be.
This is exactly that point. It's a different verbiage, which I
Mm.
appreciate, of the exact same point. Is when you know the parts that and how they're going to work, you can make choices about when you're going to make that exception. But when everything is an exception, when
Hmm.
there is no structure, then you're wasting a lot of energy, a lot of thought cycles, a lot of decision cycles, a lot of people's time. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And what happens is you don't actually look flexible, you just look confused
Yeah, or disorganized.
or disorganized. Yeah. Or less than effective,
Hmm.
all of those things. I can assure you, all of my clients would say, I'm pretty flexible
Hmm.
in how I work with my clients. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a whole lot of structure
Hmm.
in there. But I still have flexibility. I put
Yeah.
flexibility at the point that it actually makes sense to be flexible,
Hmm.
and that it causes the least amount of chaos to the business.
Yeah. Well, and so you brought up that this flexibility or this maybe misidentified flexibility. Let's just call it winging it for lack of a better
Right.
term at this point. You pointed out that, I mean, it's expensive, right? It costs.
Oh, it's super expensive.
I mean, the operation side of us says it's inefficiency is the high cost, but I mean, you ran through it costs money, it costs a bunch of time, it costs people, right? Energy. I'm sure there's just a whole lot of communication breakdown that ends up happening. What else do you think are costs associated with winging it that the CEO or the entrepreneur may not realize?
So I'm going to add to some that you already had, but expand them a little bit.
Yeah.
So one of the people costs is creates frustration for your people, which
Mhm.
means you're often burning out people or creating high turnover, which has a whole set of costs in and of itself. It also, for you as the person, it is taking decision cycles that you shouldn't have to be using.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of research, and this is way above my pay grade, but there's a lot of research that talks about that we only can make so many decisions. And, I'm not going to quote anything because it'll be completely out of context and
Right.
what, but, but we've all been there where, like, at the end of the day, where, the family says, what are you having for dinner? What are we having for dinner? And you're like, I do not want to decide one more thing. That is your brain
Mm.
saying, I have used up all of my decision cycles today. Because honestly, deciding what to have for dinner or where to have dinner or any of those things really is not a big decision. Let's be honest. It's
Mhm.
really not. But when it feels like a big decision, that means our brain said, I have used up all my decision cycles. When we're flexible, we're using or winging it, we're using decision cycles up that we don't need to be using. And therefore, we can't be using them in places that they can provide much greater impact toward the business.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm just thinking like you talked about the turnover, right? Like there's such an energy drain associated with decision fatigue. I also find that when you're constantly winging it, and this is something we see a lot, right? This is when people come to us, is there's an opportunity, like a great opportunity that presents itself, and they can't actually take advantage of it.
Oh, yeah. Because part of it is they don't know if they should or shouldn't because they don't have decision processes in place, or they they don't know if they actually have capacity to do it
Right.
because they can't look at these things in a systematic way and say, can I do this or can I not do this? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that is about um, having too much flexibility. It also, surprisingly, people think, no, my customers want me to be flexible. No, they don't. They actually don't. They want to know what to expect.
Yeah.
They want you to be adaptive to their needs, but they don't actually want you to be overly flexible.
No, I mean,
They don't want you winging it. They want to know what to expect.
yeah. And I mean, even, it's not customer centric to not tell somebody, okay, when you start working with me, you can do this. And then there's this happens, and then this happens. And this is the general timeline. Like that is, I think, one of the kindest things that we can do for the
Yeah.
people who, we serve, people who pay us to serve them. And, it's
So
how to
when you
put
say
you.
that,
Hmm.
yeah, when you say that, it makes me think of a conversation that we had with Nick Peterson a while back where he talks
Hmm.
about allegiance capital.
Yeah.
Your customers want to know, and when you're able to tell them ahead of time what's going to happen, that creates this allegiance capital. And it's like, oh, I can trust them. When you're
Hmm.
winging it, people can't trust you.
Right. No, exactly. And it's interesting how you brought up with you just don't know what you have in order to know what to do next, right? From this missed opportunity standpoint. I was thinking I recently was talking to a business owner who wants to sell their business. They're kind of tired of it. And they said, but I wouldn't know where to go about it. And I was like, well, the first thing is they're going to want to know what the profitability is of your business. And, and I laid out a couple of other things that, I know are important if you're looking to sell your business. And they were just like, I don't have anything. And I'm like, well, then somebody's going to tell you you don't have a business to buy if you can't package up what the actual offer is. Right. And the same is true for any of us who have businesses with an offer. So, do you find, Gwen, like there's an aspect of overwhelm here, I think, right? With the winging it. It's like they're not running their business is running them.
The other thing is, some people really are good at winging it.
Mhm.
It's kind of their superpower. Honestly, winging it in a conversation is one of my superpowers.
Mhm.
It is part of what I do, but I limit that to the place that it actually provides real value. Like I don't try to
Mhm.
pre-script all of my calls with my one-on-one clients. I'm
Right.
able to wing it and respond and, do those things. We don't pre-script much of this for the
Mhm.
exact same reason, because we know that I'm better in the moment on this. But it doesn't mean that we don't have a process for
Right.
this whole process of having a podcast and a video cast and,
Mhm.
all of those things. So that's fine until you add anybody else into the business, because nobody else can wing it like you wing it. And that's
Right.
where the winging it really becomes a problem, because when you're winging it, it's only you. There is no way anyone, even if you have an identical twin, they are not going to wing it the same way that you're winging it. And that's going to be a problem. As soon as you bring anyone in, even for, an hour or two a
Mhm.
week, and what this is where people complain a lot, quite honestly, about, I brought in someone to help, but they can't help me. It's taking as much time or more to have them help me. Well, it's probably because you're kind of winging it and they can't wing it like you.
Mhm.
They actually need structure. And often if they try to put around structure, the first thing you do if you love winging it is you break the structure.
Right. And I've seen that, right? I have seen,
We both seen it.
yeah, I mean, business owners who, you know, they go through this really intensive exercise of creating structure around the business, and then they never assimilate into the structure that they spent time, money, and effort in getting implemented.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's all because they want to be flexible, right? And I think sometimes, and I don't know if you've seen this, but sometimes I think when you build your business intentionally and when you put those structures in place, and kind of going back to our last episode on scaling versus growth, things get calm. And I think there's some business owners who get nervous when things are calm, and it almost makes them feel like maybe they don't have a business, like having a business equates to putting out fires
Yeah.
and all of
This is
that sort of thing.
Yeah, this is where Dan Sullivan, who owns Strategic Coach's quote is that entrepreneurs are generally really good at putting out
Mm-hmm.
fires. And when there aren't any, they're really good at setting them
Mm.
so that they have something to feel valuable for doing. And it is something I talk to a lot of our clients about as we start to calm things down. I like the word calm that you used,
Mm.
is you've got to be okay not doing anything. I talk about, you need to get good at being bored. We have lost the ability as a society in this
Mhm.
day and age with, all of the technology to be bored. But bored is actually a really important time, because that's when your brain can process other things. But when you're
Mhm.
always putting out fires and doing all of the things and having to solve problems, your brain doesn't actually get a chance to do the bigger, deeper thinking and to have the thing come forward that really needs to come forward. And so winging it means that we don't ever have to take that time, because there's always something that we have to figure out no one else can figure out. And you said something earlier I want to go back to, which
Mhm.
is creative people will often say, no, I need to be able to be creative. But true creatives that like get paid to be creative also know they have to have constraints.
Mhm.
That real creativity comes out of having some amount of constraints, because when it truly is blank,
Mhm.
and I'm not going to say a canvas, because a canvas actually provides a bit of a constraint. When it's truly blank, it really leads to complete decision fatigue. So even creatives, even if it's someone who's like an artist,
Mhm.
there are certain things that are in their constraint. that they
Right.
that they may or may not be able to identify.
Mhm.
But if they are a professional artist, it may be canvas size. It
Mhm.
may be style. There are things that are in that constraint that then allow them to be creative. Without any constraint, it's actually not creative. It is just chaos.
Right. Well, and where I think most entrepreneurs, the constraint that I think reinforces the flexibility, intuition aspect of an entrepreneur is time. Because at some point you hit the deadline. At some point you run out of time. And so regardless of how much you like to be intuitive, how much you like to go with the flow, fly by the seat of your pants, you'll get to that 11th hour. And it's like now or never. And then, and that's when your creativity comes into play. And it's like, okay, how do I push this through? Which then reinforces this whole like, I'm better, I'm better in chaos. I'm better being flexible. And that's also how you burn out your people.
Mhm.
That's how you end up getting fired by your accountant because your accountant doesn't want to receive all your materials at the 11th hour.
Right. And most of the people that you're going to try and hire to work with you in your business, their strength is exactly the opposite of that. Their strength is figuring out this project should take 10 hours and I could work on it 2 hours every week for the next 5 weeks. And they have planned on working on it for 2 hours every week for the next 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't get them the thing 5 weeks out, you get it to them one day ahead. They now have to work 10 hours to get it to the deadline. And oh,
Mm-hmm.
by the way, they had 3 other clients that they were planning on working 2 hours that day on as well. And so now you have taken what was going to be their 6 hour day and made it a 16-hour day.
Right.
And then you wonder why they're frustrated with you or they don't deliver on time.
Yeah. Because that's the other thing, right? Is you're running up to the 11th hour, but you still expect them to deliver on time. I see that happen a lot. Or you think, well,
I
I
believe
guess.
that's happened to you with some of your other clients. I know that doesn't really happen with me very often because that's not my mode. But
Right. Well, it's part of, how I got into this business is because I was somebody who could make the deadline even if nobody made the deadline to me. And, like my own circumstances have changed and I am just no longer able to provide that type of service. It's like everything has to go according to the timeline because there's just too many external factors that are unpredictable that I have to be able to fit within.
right. And one of the phrases I use a lot is don't reinforce bad behavior, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, it's all self-fulfilling. I mean, one of the things that I say a lot, so much so we've got it etched on a mug around here somewhere,
Right.
is because I really believe it, is every business works exactly as it was designed. Even if you don't think you have designed anything, even if you think you're winging it, even if you think you're being flexible, your business is working exactly as it has been designed. The problem and why most people are stressing out, burning out, all of those things, not making as much money as they could. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, is because the business is not actually designed with intention. It is designed with reaction.
Okay. Oh, that hurts. All right. So, with that in mind, I think we have drilled into the pain of the overwhelmed entrepreneur deeply enough for a single episode. What would you recommend the person who's listening who's like, fine, 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 I will operate with greater intention? What is the first step toward that intentional design of a business?
Pick one thing. Do not say, I'm going to document all of my systems. That is not actually helpful. The first thing is pick one thing. And when I say pick one thing, I usually give, like 3 different possible qualifiers to start with. So one is, and usually it's not all 3. Look for any one of these things and then say, yeah, this is the one. Sometimes it's the thing that feels hardest, most painful, the thing you really, hate doing. It sometimes is the one that you should focus on first. Another can be looking for the thing that is happening often in your business, right? So if you're winging your newsletter, I'll just pick that as a simple example, and you don't really have that process down, but you're doing it every week, you're going to get a lot of value by
Mm-hmm.
putting that, because you're going to start seeing that accumulate over time. If you're able to even shave 15 minutes off every week, you know, in a year, that's 52 times 15 minutes. That's actually a lot of time when we
It
actually
is.
when we do that multiplication. So either the thing that's most painful, the thing that's actually something that you're doing a lot of, or, and this one always surprises people, the thing you think will be the easiest to get consistent first.
Mm.
And sometimes, depending on who I'm working with, that is the one I actually focus on first. Let's show you that having a structure doesn't ruin your entire life and eliminate all your creativity. So let's do the thing that you're already pretty consistent on, and let's just get it really super consistent. And let's see what that feels like, and get a feel for it, and see where you're starting to see some benefit on it,
Mm-hmm.
and potentially document it. I don't always say document is the first thing, because it's not. It's really pay attention is the first thing. And then once you've done that, then you can take the next easiest thing. Because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of folks are like, "Oh, eat the frog." Well, then what happens is you just keep kicking the frog down the road,
Right.
right? You're not doing actually the hard thing. So sometimes it really is, especially if you know that you're really pushing against this,
Mm-hmm.
start with the easiest thing.
Yeah. Okay. So we first have to acknowledge reality, right? And
Right. Yeah.
understand that what we think is flexibility is actually an absence of structure. And some type of structure is the kindest possible gift you can give to yourself, to your clients or customers, to the people who work for you and work with you. And then we're talking about identifying, like, what I like, and I'm going to make you summarize this again because I forgot to write it down. But identifying the highest impact areas of improvement or areas for improvement. And you gave us 3 areas to look at. So the
Right.
first was,
The first is where you're feeling the most pain
okay.
by not having consistency. The second is where you're repeating a thing so often that even a little bit of improvement will have massive impact
Mhm.
over a reasonably short period of time. High repeatability.
Mhm.
And the third one, especially if you're super resistant to the concept, is the thing that you think will be easiest and is closest to already being in a structure.
Mm.
But only pick one.
Right.
That's the key thing about this is, I don't care what it is, pick one thing first. Do not try to put structure around all your systems, all of your things, because that is setting yourself up for failure as well.
Right. And then after that, so we acknowledge our current operational reality, we identify our highest impact areas for improvement. And then, what you have been talking about throughout this episode is really creating simple, sustainable systems. Can you give me an example of one?
So simple, sustainable systems can look like a lot of things. Sometimes it is as simple as having a checklist to say we do this, this, this,
Mm-hmm.
this, this. We do this, 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 and that we have everyone actually do the checklist
Mm-hmm.
every single solitary time, even if they're doing it every day and they have it memorized. We still
Mm-hmm.
do this, 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 because if, heaven forbid, they're 3 steps in and they get a call that Johnny just broke his leg on the playground and they have to run off to the hospital, we know that we're 3 steps in and that we
Mm-hmm.
have to do step 4, 5, and 6. And
Yeah.
so we don't have to figure everything out. We just go look at whatever system we're tracking this checklist. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of systems. Doesn't matter which the system is. Monday, Trello, Asana, I don't care. ClickUp, I don't care what system. But as they're doing it, they're checking it off,
Mm-hmm.
right? Every single solitary time. That creates that consistency. That creates structure. That's one of the ways that you create structure. It can be in some other document kind of form. That's not always the best way. Everyone thinks when we say SOPs that we have to have this giant manual. That's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the best answer. Sometimes it's having a video that is walking somebody through.
Mhm.
There's multiple ways that we can create the structure. So part of it is saying, this is the way we're going to do it.
Mhm.
And then the other piece, which is actually the harder piece, is making sure everyone, that includes you, CEO, is held accountable to doing it that way.
Yeah. And that's the hardest thing, right? Because we resist the structure we so desperately need.
Yes. And that's why I said, including you, CEO, because because most of the time when I'm working with CEOs and they're
Mhm.
having trouble with structure, it's because they aren't wanting to have any structure for them. They want their people to have structure so they know what's going on. And it's like, sorry, this is one of those things that is led from the top.
Mhm.
And you've got to also be held accountable. Now, that may be being held accountable by your people. If you've got the right people, Tonya, you do a great job
Mhm.
of holding me accountable because you know I mean it, that I
Mhm.
want it, and that is part of what I expect from you for what I pay you to do is to
Mhm.
push back and say, Gwen, you are not following the process.
Right.
I probably don't do it as much as most people because I actually like process, but I know
Right.
I still do it. I still do it from time to time. If you don't have people who will do that, and if they're low enough, they will not, no matter what you tell them, they will not be able to push back on it. You may
Mhm.
need to have someone else holding you accountable for it.
Mhm.
That's one of the things that we do for our clients is we hold the CEO accountable for the things that they actually need to do because I have no hesitation calling people on what they're doing.
Right. Exactly. And then, I think the logical last step, right? So we've created the simple, sustainable system. Then it's once the system is built and everybody is following it, everybody's living within it, that's where you can find the opportunities for flexibility.
Yes. And keep in mind, you want to push that flexibility as much as possible to the end of the process as opposed to the beginning. Because if you put that flexibility in the beginning, if you think of a flow chart or anything like that,
Hmm.
that means that all of a sudden there's way more branches that can happen, which adds to the complexity. We're
Right.
always looking to simplify. So I'm just making this up, if there's 7 steps and the flexibility comes between 6 and 7,
Hmm.
that is way less complicated than when the flexibility comes between step 1 and 2.
Yes.
And so can you move that flexibility further down the line? And often that's where it actually has the most impact for the result that
Yes, definitely. And I agree 100%. And also, your result is more reliable.
oh, it's way more reliable. I mean, like we can have a whole conversation about that, and we probably have somewhere already. But that's the thing. Put the flexibility as close to the end of the process if you actually need it.
Hmm.
And part of the time is you'll discover, oh, adding that flexibility is actually just creating more confusion for my client.
Hmm.
We think people want more choices. They do not actually want more choices.
They don't. No.
They really don't. They really just want maybe one option outside of the standard,
Hmm.
maybe. But they really don't want 5 options down there. Even if you think you do, you don't either.
No, because that's where decision fatigue comes in, right? That's where the
Exactly.
overwhelm comes in. All right, Gwen, thank you for this. This was great. And I think, if nothing else, I hope that people recognize that flexibility and absence of structure are two very different things and they stop conflating that. I love you leaving us with every business operates exactly as designed, and the problem is few have been designed with intention. And so, listener, now it's up to you. It's up to you to implement. Today, we have uncovered the real cost of winging it in your business and why intentional design is so crucial for sustainable success. You got to remember, and maybe put it on a sticky note even. Your business will run exactly as you have designed it, even if you didn't mean to do it. So, even if you weren't intentional. And if you want some support with designing your business with intention. That's exactly what we do around here. We would love it if you would visit us at thebusinessyoureallywant.com. You can explore our free resources, and you can also explore our services as well. And until next time, keep working on those incremental improvements that have big impact over time. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallywant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.